About 3 years ago, in the midst of the pandemic, I tried my hand at doing anime analysis and video essays. What transpired was exactly what you would expect from a 17-year-old trying his best to sound like your favorite anituber. Long story short, it was a mess, and for the past 3 years, I would look back on that video pondering if I should just make it again. And although it was poorly made, the script I made for that project actually had a lot of feelings and thoughts that were truly genuine. And honestly, I was very proud at that time for being able to convey that. It's one of the reasons why I enjoyed dabbling in this genre of video making. So without further ado, I once again present to you No Media, 5 centimeters per second. When you think about a film directed by Makoto Shinkai, what do you think of? Most people would envision a high-budget grandiose film with stunning visuals and a plot centered around the turbulence of adolescence. Films like Your Name or Weathering with You follow these attributes to a T while also toppling records in the box office. And there's a great reason as to why these titles are so revered in the modern day. But with the epoch of ever-improving technology and a thriving industry, we are seeing more and more titles produced each year, and it's getting harder and harder for certain older projects to be recognized and appreciated. Obviously, you would have exceptions like Cowboy Bebop or Neon Genesis Evangelion, which will likely forever stand the test of time. But what about titles that aren't as influential? Ones that aren't considered classics by the vast majority? This is the sole reason as to why I even stepped into this genre of videos. I simply won't allow shows that I loved and adored to be forgotten. This is especially the case in 5 centimeters per second, a project that I deem to be a gem hidden within a quarry of industry titans. If you're not familiar with the filmography of Makoto Shinkai, 5 centimeters per second was an anime film he directed back in 2007, a time where anime as a genre was just beginning to break into the mainstream. Looking back, it truly is no surprise why this project did not garner as much attention as it should have. Premiering in Japan during its initial release, the audience overseas was little to none. But it's a whole new era now, and with how popular Shinkai has gotten in the last decade, I think now is an appropriate time to shed light on what I believe to be his magnum opus. The story isn't anything that you haven't heard of before. It's a coming-of-age story following our protagonist Takaki through his years of being a child to an adult. In the film, the story is separated into 3 parts, each part representing a different stage in Takaki's life. First part being his childhood, second part his adolescence, and third part his adulthood. Each episode brings a whole new set of feelings and meanings to comprehend, and by the end they all come together to form a beautiful narrative, one that would stick close to me for a very long time. The first part is kicked off with a scene of Takaki and his best friend Akari in their grade school days, playing around under a setting of falling cherry blossoms. Akari proceeds to tell Takaki that the speed of the cherry blossoms falling is 5 centimeters per second. They seem truly carefree, and overall it's just a feel-good introduction. The scene then ends as Akari runs to the other side of a railroad crossing gate and tells Takaki that she hopes to see the cherry blossoms with him again. Shortly after, a train passes by and blocks our view of her. This is followed by a time skip, and Takaki has now graduated grade school, and a sequence of scenes are played to us that depict his time in middle school. It is revealed to us that Akari actually moved away after they graduated, and they write letters to each other to keep in touch. These letters are narrated by Akari throughout the sequence, and we are shown Takaki just going about his school life while they reminisce and traded letters. There's something so heartwarming and yet so lonely about this introduction. We are given so much symbolism but in such little time. The sequence of scenes that play during Akari's letters are cut in such a way that it really portrays the fast and fleeting bullet that is our youth. Letter by letter, more time passes, and letter by letter, it gets harder and harder to write one. There is only so much you could write about when you're miles and miles apart, with each person having their own sets of lives to live. But by watching these two fervently try to stay close, you hold on to an inkling of hope that maybe a miracle could happen. Unfortunately, this is not that type of anime. We are then told that Takaki will be moving to Kagoshima, a city on the southern reaches of Japan, significantly further away from Akari. At this point, their drift from each other seemed inevitable. However, regardless of the news, they still make an effort to meet each other and plan out a date before Takaki moves. Considering how far apart they will be in the near future, this would likely be the last time for a long time that they will be seeing each other. It's going to be a long journey, but that's a small price to pay for Takaki. Embarking on his trip, Takagi looks back at the time where they would spend all their time together, reminiscing on the memories they made. A sinking feeling of sadness looms as you realize that this might just be the last time that they see each other. As he gets onto his first transfer in Shinjuku Station, they announce that there will be a 4-minute delay due to ongoing snowfall. It's a minor little bump in the road. There's bound to be something that goes wrong, right? He gets onto his second transfer, another delay, this time for 8 minutes. Then, a temporary stop for 10 minutes. Next, a stop with no ETA, and now all of a sudden he's running late. A creeping feeling of anxiousness grows as you realize that his chance to see Akari again is in jeopardy. By the time the train breaks the silence, Takagi gets off at his next stop at 7:41 p.m. He is now 41 minutes late, with a few more transfers to go. When he gets to his next train, more delays. A few moments later, and he loses a letter he spent 2 weeks on writing. Takagi put everything into that letter. His heart, his feelings, everything that he couldn't say to her before she moved. The train arrives, and he steps in holding back tears. It is now 9 o'clock, and the train halts in its tracks as we stare at the snowfall. They ended up stopping there for the better part of 2 hours. It's now that even us, the audience, are disheveled. What did Takagi do to deserve this? Why is he being dealt such a bad hand? It just feels hopeless. By the time Takagi arrives at his destination, it will be close to midnight, about 4 to 5 hours past the agreed upon time. Hoping that Akari has long left, he opens the door to the waiting room, and he sees a familiar figure. It's a miracle. Akari has fallen asleep waiting for him the entire time.
Oh, hold up, man. Just give me a second, man. Oh, shit.
They talk like they used to, share food like they used to, and at the end, they embrace each other. For just a moment, everything was just like how it was back then. For Takagi and Akari, it was more than they could ask for. When it was time to say their goodbyes, they tell each other that they'll be just fine. Takagi tells Akari that he'll write letters and call. As the train departed, we pan to Akari and see that she is holding a letter. Just like Takagi, she had also decided to write one as well. Shiyu stands there and stares at it with a look of uncertainty. We are once again brought down to reality. In contrast to Takagi, Akari is reluctant, almost as if she acknowledges the absurdity of hoping for a miracle. We see the first hints of maturity awaken in this moment. It's a sign that Akari has already taken the first steps to moving on. Takagi, on the other hand, went through what seemed like a trial set by God just to be able to see her again. No matter what stood in his path, in the end, they were still able to be together. This was all that Takagi needed to cast all his worries aside. He believed that they were kindred spirits destined to be together. Even with what seemed to be a mountain that stood in their way, one kiss was all that it took for Takagi to brush all of that aside. It's a great example of the blissful ignorance of youth. Part 2 begins with what seems to be a daydream. It shows Takagi and Akari watching the sun rise over what looks like the earth. I think this is supposed to portray what is inside Takagi's heart and mind. Even if Akari travels to the deepest reaches of the galaxy, Takagi will follow. They are kindred spirits after all. This then transitions into Takagi practicing his archery at school. We are now watching his high school years, and he has since settled down in his new home of Kagoshima. We are actually told the story from the eyes of a different character this time, a classmate and friend by the name of Kanae. We follow Kanae through her interactions with Takagi at school, and it's painfully obvious that she has a crush on him. However, for some odd reason, she just can't find it in herself to confess to him. Every time she would build up the courage to confront him about her feelings, she would freeze and hesitation sets in. It is later revealed that the reason why she can't confess is because Takagi was never really looking at her. He already has someone that he's already thinking about. Kanae notices that Takagi is always on his phone messaging someone, and even laments to herself that she wishes that was her. There's a scene that plays, where Kanae finds Takagi upon a hillside. He seems to be doing the usual, messaging someone. Her inner monologue plays and states that every time she would be around Takagi, a pain would grow in her chest. She sits down next to him and thinks about how nice of a person he is. So nice that it could make her cry. She asks about his plans for the future and which colleges he plans on going to. He responds by saying that he wanted to go to one in Tokyo, the city where he and Akari grew up. She follows up by saying that she wasn't surprised. After all, it seemed as if he was dying to leave. Lately, Kanae has been struggling to fill out her career planning sheet. Stressing over it, she was uncertain about what she wanted to do in the future. Compared to Kanae, Takagi seemed like he had it all figured out, but he refutes this. He tells her that he spends all his time hesitating, struggling to do his best. Kanae is relieved to hear this and folds up her career planning sheet into a paper airplane to then send it flying over the countryside. As they're on their way home, they get stopped at an intersection. A semi-truck carrying a space rocket passes, and Kanae tells Takagi that it travels at 5 kilometers per hour to get to the launch pad. Takagi seems startled by this. He's heard something similar before, not quite the same, but also not completely unrelated. This is a callback to when Takagi and Akari were kids. Cherry blossoms that would fall at a speed of 5 centimeters per second. It's interesting when you think about how slow 5 kilometers per hour is, but how fast 5 centimeters per second seems. It equates to only 0.18 kilometers per hour, and yet cherry blossoms appear to fall so quickly. I think this conveys the feeling of how life feels more and more daunting as we grow up, that it makes our childhood feel as if it just passed by in a blink of an eye. When they get home, Kanae is cheerful about the fact that Takagi also wasn't sure about what he wanted to do in the future. It seems as if she finally found something that connected herself and Takagi, something that could potentially allow him to break out of his shell and notice her. And when I mean notice her, I mean it in a deeper sense. It's not as if Takagi is ignoring her or is completely uninterested. Kanae can tell that his focus is just not entirely on her. Let me give you an example. Shortly after they get home, Takagi has a daydream, one very similar to the one that plays at the start of the episode. In both dreams, notice how Akari is staring off into the distance and how Takagi stares at her. It's a subtle metaphor as to how one side has moved on and how the other is still chasing. Kanae could tell that there is someone or something that he is still fixated on, and that it anchors his heart. This is ultimately what spurs her to hesitate on telling him her true feelings. It's because deep down she knows her feelings won't be reciprocated, and unfortunately it won't be in a genuine way. This is strongly supported by the following scene, as we see Takagi typing messages only to delete them afterwards. There is only one person that we can infer to be the receiver. All those times that Kanae saw Takagi on his phone, he was writing drafts only to delete them. We finally get a glimpse as to what he means when he says that he's constantly hesitating. Takagi is in a state of limbo. He wrestles between moving on and pursuing his miracle. This is ultimately reflected in his deleted messages, as he always spends the time to write them, but can't find it within himself to actually send them. It's bittersweet. We see Takagi finally showing hints of his own maturity and letting go of his ignorant youth. Some time passes, and now Kanae has made up her mind. Being a surfer, she promised herself that she would confess when she was able to successfully ride a wave again, and that day has come. She braces herself for the moment, but yet again, that same hesitation that haunted her at the start is creeping in again. She heads home with Takagi like usual, and stops at a convenience store with him like usual. It's an utterly painful journey as she tries to get her feelings out to him, but something is stopping her. She holds back tears the entire time, but ultimately, it's too painful. She cries while walking home with him, seeing nothing but his back the entire time. She pleads to herself for Takagi to stop being so nice to her. She doesn't want to keep liking someone that she knows wouldn't do so back. Even if she was rejected, she knows it won't be because of his true feelings. He has someone that he's always looking at, and in knowing that, it tears Kanae apart. As Takagi turns to ask what's wrong, the space rocket that they both encountered that night on the hillside shoots up towards the sky, in one of the most beautiful yet heart-wrenchingly sad scenes I've ever seen. The rocket symbolizes how desperate we are as humans to constantly reach. It's a subtle nod to Takagi's optimistic struggle. This part of the film was truly masterful. It's a brilliant move from a writer's standpoint to change the storyteller. Getting an outside point of view of how it feels like to interact with Takagi at the time really brings out the hypocrisy of his character. One so foolish to allow a single kiss to inspire him, only to, in the end, get cold feet. All of the hurdles that he triumphed over to be together with Akari are left at the wayside. It's an amazing way to show development and maturity in Takagi, as we see him realize the true nature of what he's actually pursuing. This part of the movie is significantly shorter than the previous parts. I don't know if it was deliberately made to convey this, but I like to think that this portrays how short life seems when you ascend into adulthood. There are less experiences that are new to you, and compared to when you were in your childhood or adolescence, walking and running around in the streets of Tokyo just doesn't feel the same as it once used to. Takagi and Akari are now full-grown adults, and once again, the story follows Takagi. He has since settled down by himself and gotten himself a stable job. On his way to work, he sees a cherry blossom tree, and it reminds him of someone. He glances at it and smiles, continuing on his way to work. This symbolizes that Takagi has moved on, let go by the anchors that once closed himself to Kanae. We see him walk towards a railroad crossing gate, and it's the same one that Akari crossed in the beginning of the film. Someone walks past him in the opposite direction, someone that seems familiar. Turning around to see if their suspicions are correct, a train suddenly comes in and blocks the line of sight. It might be a couple years too late, but Akari's wish has come true. She was able to see the cherry blossoms with Takagi again. This transitions into a scene that depicts Takagi's regular day-to-day life. As he walks home from work, there's this negative atmosphere that envelopes him. He walks with a dissatisfied look on his face and even ignores a call that he gets from a woman. It's revealed that he's in a relationship with her, and that's all the more unsettling. With the start of this part, we are shown clues which indicate that Takagi has moved on, but why does he seem so sad? Why is he ignoring calls from his partner? It leads you to ask yourself these questions, and well, the conclusion is he truly hasn't fully moved on. They've been together for 3 years and exchanged thousands of messages, and yet, in Takagi's own words, their hearts only grew closer by 1 centimeter. We then catch a glimpse as to what Akari has been up to, and she's gotten married. She seems happy and has fully moved on from Takagi. It's 2 sides of the same coin. They both start at the same base, but ended up on completely different sides. Takagi struggled with the notion of moving on, and that caused him to be sorrowful and aimless. This led him to quit his job, and he discerned that he was just going through the motions of life. It was, without a better word, pitiful to see him turn out this way. But it's a painfully realistic portrayal of what it means to hesitate, to stay stuck, to ignore all the prerequisites and blindly chase, guided by hope for a miracle. It's something that I think a lot of people could relate to, including myself, and for people like us, this hits right at home. The movie ends with a sequence of scenes showcasing Takagi and Akari going their separate ways, with flashbacks of simpler times interwoven in between. The final scene shows Takagi and Akari walking through the same neighborhood they used to, through the same railroad crossing they used to, and with the same cherry blossoms falling like they used to. The same scene from the start of the part plays, and this time as the train passes by, Akari has long since left. Takagi smiles while turning his back, signaling the end of his indecision. In a way, I saw myself in Takagi. Throughout my childhood, I was also frequently moving due to my parents' work situation. I would bounce around elementary schools and middle schools, and as a result, I lost a lot of friends because of that. Time to time, I would reminisce about those memories that I had with them, and there's a few of them that I could contact even now, but I'm hesitant on that. So much time has passed that there's a fear that sets in when I think about how they could be someone completely different from what I remember. Using myself as an example, if I went back in time to see myself in middle school, my adolescent ass would never in a million years believe that I was him. That's why I can't bring myself to reach out to them. After all this time, even they themselves haven't even reached out to me. All the experiences since, good and bad, have made me the person I am today, and I only wish that the ones that built theirs served them well. So as I write this script, I contemplate if sometimes things are better left as memories. That if I push too far, maybe I would come to regret it. I don't think anybody would want that.